What's up, Warriors, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement Podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I am your host, Chris, and it is already May 5th to be exact, and we are currently in Mental Health Awareness Month, and this is the first among many interviews, hopefully, that I will have this month. Of course, you guys know how important this month and, basically every month is to me in regards to mental health. And, personally, I feel it shouldn't be just delegated to one month, just like men's mental health, just like women's mental health. I feel like we should have this conversation every month, because I feel it kind of, it's great we're talking about it. It's great we're dedicating a month to it, but I just feel like everybody's struggling every day of the year. And if you keep it at a month, it's just like, okay, so what are we doing the rest of the 11 months? You know, um, but that's just me. I just feel that awareness should go across the board, not just be strict to one month. But that being said, today's guest I've known her, I believe, about 4 or 5 years. She's one of my moderators in our mental health group on Facebook, and she's a good friend of mine. And I'm so grateful that she decided to reach out and come on the podcast. So please help me welcome Brittany. Brittany, how you doing today?
Hey there, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I feel like this has been going for a while, and I'm surprised you haven't been on here sooner.
I know, me too. I had to work up the nerve, but I'm
I'm
excited.
glad you reached out because I'm really excited to hear about your story. I mean, obviously, I know a majority of the things that you've shared with us in the group and personally in our group chat. So, um, yeah, let's uh let's get this started the right way. Where does your journey into mental health start for you?
Um, Gosh, I would say when I was in elementary school, when the signs of anxiety started to come out. And in children, we know that can be a little different than adults, but at that age, I had severe stomach aches during school and I cried a lot. I really felt the need to want my mom. And that's kind of where it first met, it first started.
Right. So I can only imagine that you were probably taken out of school quite a bit, or did your mom just kind of leave you at school and be like, "Oh, you'll be okay"?
Actually, she worked at the school. She was
Okay.
my vice principal. So they would take me to her office quite a bit, and she would basically talk to me, give me a hug, try to get me calmed down, and say, go back. But I would always be back a little bit later that day for something.
So
But
what did
it was nice to have her there. So
that's good. What did resources look like back then? I mean, I know elementary school we're fairly young, so I mean, it's hard to pinpoint exactly where the world was, but do you
yeah.
remember there being any sort of resources that your mom, had for you?
Um, Even before the resources came the stigma. My mom thought it was just me being a child trying to get attention. She did not think that I actually needed some help in dealing with what I was dealing with at that time. And even when the next diagnosis came, too. So, the only research that I was aware of at that time would have been the guidance counselor. Um, Other than that, my mom wouldn't have wanted to admit that there was an issue that we needed to seek help elsewhere at that
Right.
point.
Yeah, I do remember specifically when my parents got divorced, I was 8 years old. So I remember going to the guidance counselor quite a bit. And I remember when I went into middle school, I think sixth grade, I kind of developed like this other personality, like just kind of like it was my way of separating all these dark thoughts and all these angry feelings. And I remember acting out a lot outside of school. And it caught on inside of school, and I had to go to the guidance counselor and start talking to them. Why are you doing this? Again, it was like, oh, he's a kid, he's just trying to get attention kind of thing.
Hmm.
But that guidance counselor, man, I wish I could remember her name because she got a lot out of me at an age where again that stigma of they're kids, they're just acting out, and it's that transition period from elementary to middle school. And I remember nothing ever becoming of those guidance counselor sessions. It was
Right.
just more we had a conversation and it never went further than that
Yes.
room. My parents were never made aware of it. So it was really weird.
Right. Right. Yep.
So
Um,
you had anxiety when you were in elementary school. Did that
yes.
carry over to middle school, high school too, or did it kind of
Absolutely.
cool down?
Absolutely. The depression made its entrance into my life around age 15, 16. And the very first time I remember having experience with that is I went into this class and one of my good friends I'd known like all my life sat down in the desk in front of me. He turned around and he said, "Hey, how are you?" And all of a sudden I just busted out crying. I mean, bawling. And he was like, "Oh my God, what did I do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. You didn't do anything," but like, and I had to, leave the classroom. And from then on, it kind of happened quite often. It was crying with, it didn't seem like any reason for it. Um, I do think that mom did seek a little bit of help at that time, because it was, I believe, diagnosed anxiety and depression somewhere around that time. And then, of course, as teen years went on through high school, you're also dealing with the hormones. And that was very difficult, I think, because those hormones seem to be exacerbated by the already there mental health issues.
Right.
So I was very moody. um, and then once I got to college, I was then diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. The way that started was actually in college. I was working part time, going to school full time, and having EMT classes half part time too. And I would sleep, and I wanted so much sleep. I would sleep in the car between my classes. I mean, I would sleep as much as possible, even though I was so busy with all those things, and I never felt rested. And I was at times very, very weak. And I was having a lot of body aches and pains. And I went to so many doctors, neurologists, all of that. And what came from that was the diagnosis of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue.
Right.
So that came in during my college years. So now we're at, anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and then into my adult years. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I forgot one in college, the ADD. I definitely had a hard time focusing on one task, and I had test anxiety horribly. Um, but I would try to organize, let's say clean your room. I would start in one area and then I'd go bounce over here and there. So like I never got done because I could not like I could not focus. And it wasn't not, I could sit still. I sat still fine. It wasn't the ADHD hyperactive part, but it was just focusing. And then once I got to adulthood, the mood swings became more prevalent. And I had like obsessive thoughts. Um, I was paranoid about different things at different times. So then came the bipolar diagnosis. So that was more recent. That was, I would say, probably just a couple years ago. Um,
I think I
that
do
I've been
remember
dealing.
you sharing that diagnosis with us, right?
Yes, I was pretty shocked.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I almost expected it too.
Mhm. So let's rewind back to when depression started making its way into your life. Um, did you go through any kind of therapy at the time? Did you deal with like any kind of suicidal thoughts, or was it more just high emotion almost all the time?
It was high emotion all the time. I do believe I had a counselor at that
Mhm.
time, which I think throughout my life, having a counselor has helped all the way
Right.
through, no matter what year, how old I am. So I'm glad I did have that. And then medication was introduced, I believe, after the incident in high school. I think that's when it was first introduced. And I want to say that might have been Wellbutrin.
Right.
Um, and that I also had later in life too. But then that also was a cause for me being hospitalized last year too.
Right.
But but it was high emotions. I did not have really suicidal thoughts at that point in my life or dark thoughts. It was more like I was thinking about people losing loved ones a lot. And I was just like worried about everything. I mean, crying for no reason and then crying on top of crying because I'm crying. I mean, it was just a lot to deal with at that age, especially.
Right. And so you said counseling has always just kind of been pretty dominant throughout your life. Have you had any kind of counseling or therapy as an adult?
Yes, absolutely. So, what started that more recently was when I was hospitalized. The psychiatrist that came in to my room that day,
Mm,
that was his last actual consult with that hospital. And I ended up following him over to his new office. So I see him on a regular basis, my psychiatrist, and I praise him because I feel like he saved my life by
yeah.
walking in that day and knowing what to do. So I see him on a regular basis, and then I also see a counselor, like a
Mm,
therapist,
right.
on a regular basis. I try to touch base with her every 2 weeks or so, and with him, it's more so like once a month or so.
Mm,
And they both work in the same office, and I tell them all the same things. Some of it has been telehealth at times, which has been helpful because I have two children.
yeah.
But it has helped me so much because as an adult, I've dealt with so many different things happening, and it's nice to talk it out with her, and she kind of puts things into perspective and then gives it back to me, and gives me suggestions and tips on things, how to
Right.
deal with things.
So if you could remember how counseling was when you were younger teens versus now, would you say there's been a drastic change in how therapy was back then for you
Oh,
versus
yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Um, Definitely. The therapist that worked with me as I was younger, I felt very judged.
now?
I felt like she, saw things one way and that was it. She never really provided me with tips and tricks. There was no really feedback. It was more like I was just spilling to her and she was judging me, is kind of what it felt like, to be honest. And now they listen to me, they take it in, they'll write it down, and they definitely give me insight to everything.
So I do wonder if your age at the time had a play in how she approached your sessions with her. Um, because I do feel like I had a similar experience with my therapist. Well, I'm not really a therapist, but outpatient counselor after my first attempt at 14. Um, I feel I couldn't tell you any advice that she gave me, nothing. Like it was a
Right.
very weird time growing up because
Hmm.
mental health wasn't talked about.
Yeah.
People were still taking their lives back then, and it was a much different conversation than what we can have now.
Yeah,
But
they didn't know what to say. They didn't know what to say or do at that time, really. We had to come mental health had to come so much farther with research and
yeah,
everything.
yeah. And now it's just kind of like when you're just visiting a regular doctor, I've noticed they ask you questions. Are you depressed? Do you have a counselor? Do you need a counselor? I feel we've come such a long way, but at the same time, I also feel like we have so much further to
Right.
go.
Absolutely. Yep. We have
Because
to keep those conversations going.
yeah, because like I alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, it was more so I wish we could talk about this every month instead of just once a month. You know,
Right.
I I do my best to keep that conversation going, but again, with the one track mind and short attention spans, everything's just a hashtag for a specific month. It's like, oh well, we talked about mental health last month, so we're not going to acknowledge it this month. But
Right. Yeah.
people are still struggling and suffering. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like I don't want to sound morbid about it every time we have a conversation, but look at the numbers. I don't even have to be morbid about it. Like it's when you look at how many people take their life a day, just a day, not even a year, a day, your jaw drops on the ground because it's like we're not doing enough.
Right. It touches everyone eventually, pretty much. And it definitely touched my life for sure.
Yeah. Um, So you talked about your diagnosis and everything.
Hmm.
So how has mental health how has your mental health affected your day to day, with your job and with your family? Like, has it, I don't want to say gotten in the way, but has it presented more challenges as you've gotten older and you have kids and you're married? Has it presented more challenges along the way, or have you found a way to adjust?
Absolutely. The challenges have come as I've gotten older. Um, e- Even just this past week, I struggled, and thank goodness, I have a wonderful husband who is definitely my support system, like one of my biggest supporters. And I was able to tell him everything, and he kind of helped talk me back down because I was high, I was elevated, I was frustrated, I was overwhelmed. And that definitely does happen as far as with my job. I get stressed with my job. I get overwhelmed with my kids because the oldest is kind of having his own mental health issues right now that we're trying to figure out. So like I'm dealing with mine, dealing with his, and stress at work. So it has been difficult, but medication is one way that it's helped. The counseling has definitely helped. Um, Writing things down sometimes
Yeah,
helps too, because that's kind
absolutely.
of almost like a release. If
Hmm.
something's bothering you and you can't let it go, it's almost like if you write it down and then throw it away, you can try to let alleviate that stress off your shoulders. And back to the stress and like chronic pain, we carry a lot of our stress on our shoulders. So my shoulders kill me most of the time, and my feet, and a lot of that is because of that being the case.
Right.
So like I use a weighted blanket often. That helps me tremendous with anxiety and the chronic pain. So the challenges have arisen as an adult, but so has my way to manage it. I've learned so much tips and tricks to manage it. And then I have that huge support system, which is so important.
Right.
I have my parents that actually live like 4 or 5 houses down. And then, of course, my husband and my children right here. And like last year, I had to rely on everybody for a two week period of time. I had to
Hmm.
rely on everyone for everything for me. And if I didn't have those people, I wouldn't be here today.
Right.
So I'm so thankful for that support system and for reaching out for help. When I first got sick, basically, I'll call it that. I went downhill pretty quickly, and I'm so glad that I was able to make that phone call and say, "Guys, this is happening right now. I need somebody to be here with me. I cannot be alone right now." And they got here
Right.
as soon as they could.
So I would love to jump into your family because I feel you mentioning having such a strong support system is super important in any case.
Mhm.
Um, so versus when you were growing up, when resources and research wasn't up to par to what it is now. How is your relationship with your parents now that you have a diagnosis, that you have your therapist? Like, how is that dynamic now as an adult?
It is 100 and million trillion times better than it was when as a child and teenager, because as a child and teenager, their stigma with
Mm,
it was like, you're fine. It's just you're just doing this, you just want attention. But now that there's diagnosis, they can do their own research on it. They can look it up and say, okay, this makes sense. This is what we're seeing. This is what we're hearing from her, and this is why. Um, and I'm so glad they came around to realize those things. And I feel more comfortable talking to them now about it, and I'm more open with them about it because they are getting it finally. I'm
right.
33 years old, but they're finally getting it.
How long did it take them to start coming around?
It was a while. I would say probably around the time when the fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue probably around college time is when it started to turn. And then as an adult is when it really clicked.
That's good. I'm glad that they started seeing the light and they started seeing that there are ways that they could possibly help you and do their own research. Um, so you mentioned you said one of your kids is dealing with mental health struggles, right?
Yes, yes,
The oldest one, I'm assuming, right?
yes.
Um, so how do you go about addressing that since he's at such a very young age? Like, are there steps
Yeah.
you take with him? Do you have him journal? Like, what does that look
Yes.
like?
So my 6-year-old, his name is Landon.
Mhm.
He's in elementary school. He's with me. The behaviors that started presenting, I would say probably a year or two ago, um, he was very impulsive. He would get very angry at times too, and we've seen that more recently too, especially like he'll start seeing red. Something will set him off, and when he sees red, you cannot talk to him. You cannot talk him down. You just have to kind of like isolate him, to be honest, and let him do his own thing. And we do have a punching bag in his room, and we try to encourage him, like, if you get angry, hit this bag, because he tends to destroy other things instead of using the bag. He'll, like, he had a bulletin board, little cork board on his wall. He tore that down. He's torn blinds up, tears toys up, throws them. Um, he Even now that he's a little bit older, he's the impulsive stuff, like, for example, throwing baby powder all around the bathroom or slinging his toothpaste all over the place. And I know it kind of sounds like, he's just being a boy, but like there's been a lot of it. And the anger issue is what's really concerning to us. He's said some very terrible things to me and to his brother and about his brother. And there was one occasion where he said some very, very alarming things. Um, uh, that I don't know where a 6-year-old child gets those thoughts at
Right.
all.
Hmm.
And the way we do handle it is, first of all, the isolation, of course, talking to him. We do have him write sometimes. And he does have a nurse, psychiatric nurse. And she prescribes his medications. He hasn't really officially been diagnosed with different things, but we've touched on a lot of it, and we're thinking, oh, maybe this, maybe that, but he's not autistic. We did the assessment for that. He kind of does have oppositional defiant disorder. I think she's kind of, seeing that. And he does take medicine for anxiety. He does exactly what I do and worry about things obsessively.
Right.
So that medication has definitely helped him too. So, yeah, it's just basically working with her a lot. And at school, I'm there where he goes, and we have a behavior specialist that he kind of talks to, and he does an after school program called Mighty Minds, and that's supposed to help them with big emotions. They were doing a lunch group as well, which was kind of the same thing, and the guidance counselor, of course, too. And I have had meetings with the teacher, the behavioral specialist, the guidance counselor, and our assistant principal to kind of explain what we're dealing with at home, seeing if they're seeing the same things in school, and also letting them know about the family dynamic, because his father and I are not together. We've been divorced since he was like 2. And he goes to his dad's every other weekend usually, but his dad's in the Navy, and his dad has kind of said that he's going to be deploying soon. And then he keeps going back and forth on it. But during the week, he doesn't always call very much. And it affects Landon very much so.
Yeah.
And actually, his father and I just had a huge falling out a little bit ago, but it was probably for the better because he's been doing better at calling him. He talks to him about respect, and especially respecting your mother, because he was very, very mean to me several times. Um, but it has gotten better as far as, staying in touch with the psychiatric nurse, his father, and then staying on his medications. So that's kind of how we're handling that.
So with the resources at your job for him, would you say that he's making progress then?
Yes,
With his
absolutely.
anger?
Yes.
Okay.
He's doing a lot better with talking about those big feelings, and
Right.
being able to tell us, I'm mad or I'm frustrated, and this is what made me mad and frustrated. And I try to get a progress note from school also to see how his day went, and if there's any behaviors that we need to monitor, because I do have we are in a waiting list for I guess it would be like a inpatient assessment.
Mhm.
kind of deal at Kennedy Krieger. Um, so I'm trying to keep documentation of everything that's happening so they get a full picture.
Yeah. So let's rewind a little bit to college. I know you had mentioned that you had some projects that you did
Yes.
um for mental health stuff, but what did that look like for you and how those come along?
So in college, I started it it was a soldier support project basically. I ended up adopting a soldier and her name was also Brittany. And I ended up creating this project in for her basically. It was all about her. We shared the name, so I named it Team Brits Support Our Troops Project. And it was basically to lift spirits of those troops that are deployed, send them a bit of home, try to help cheer them up because I know the mental health struggles that they're dealing with. Definitely wanted to help with that. So I would send care packages, letters. In those care packages, it was like, meats, snacks, like beef jerky, drink packets, gums, and um sometimes socks because they didn't get a lot of socks and shampoos and just anything I could think of. And I would get kids to make them cards that say, we love you. Thank you so much for your service. And it was a huge project. And gosh, we sent so many packages over that time that was going. And then after college was when the rest of it started. After college, I got a job with the local health department, and I was the resource coordinator for a organization that served I'm sorry, not mental, children, youth, and families in our area. And we came up with this project there that was called Mental Health No, like KNOW, the facts, no, NO, stigma. And we had a big conference, we had a guest speaker. There was like mini sessions you could sign up for that were like specialized. So, for example, men's mental health. And there was like a speaker that would teach that. And then over here, we would have suicide prevention and things like that. Um, Under that project, we also had what was called race, like RACE, the stigma. And that was basically like a 5K run slash walk. And at that, before the walk, there's tables set up all along that have resources. The health department had their own resources, and then you have all the different counseling agencies and the emergency room staffs, and like they would give you all the information you need and link you to all the resources in the community. And then of course it raised money for that same cause. So I was very passionate about that too. And then came the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. For several years, I helped plan those walks in Ocean City, Maryland, actually. And I was huge in like coming up with all the resources that we would have at that day. They would have tables set up. I would plan where each was. We would have memorial beads. You wear different colors for different things. I lost a sister, I lost a brother. I have my own thoughts. You wear different colors for all that. We had a memorial area where you would decorate a sand dollar. And I wrote a poem
Um,
actually about sand dollars. And kind of we put them on bookmarks actually. And it was about losing someone basically and remembering them. So you would decorate the sand dollars, and then they had, walls you can write messages and things like that. And then the walk was amazing too. We had so many people turn out for these events. And then in 2012 and 13, I believe, I became the actual walk chair. And in 2013, my cousin Heather and I created a team that was going to walk. And we named it after our grandmother, basically, because she loved butterflies. So we named our team Butterflies for Life, saying we want life. And we were super excited about it. I had t-shirts that I was going to get made. And then about 4 days before that walk, I suddenly and tragically lost her to suicide,
oh,
even though she was going to be walking with me. And it was very sudden, very tragic. She was my best friend. She was my sister. Um, and the way it was done still haunts me to this day. Maybe that can be another whole, but so that became passion as soon as I started it, but then as time went on and it became even more of something that I wanted to work for and do for her. So
Right.
I wasn't able to participate in that walk that year, of course. But I think I did pick it up the next year, at least for one more year before I left.
Yeah.
And it's still a passion. I haven't been like actively participating in all these projects because I have a family now and my own
Yeah.
issues and stuff. But it's still things I support stuff. So
Do you have a yearly ritual on honoring her?
wearing butterflies is a big thing, which I do that all year anyway.
Right.
But I I haven't really done much else. I mean, I could, and there's
It's tough.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah,
Losing your
definitely
best friend
can.
is tough.
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine. Well, I mean, I can't imagine, but
right,
it's how how have you been able to adapt to loss and grief? Like, I know for me, it's the easiest way I've found myself to get through it is obviously acknowledging that they're gone
right.
and, honoring them the only way I know how to in their
Yes.
birthdays or their day of loss. What does that look like for you? Like, how
Yeah.
do you deal with grief?
Basically, um, I just had to adjust to her not being in my life.
Right.
Um, and I had to be more present in the now too.
Mhm.
I had to focus on what I'm doing today, what I'm going to be doing tomorrow, what I need to take care of and things. And I had to kind of force myself to not think back so much because if I let myself, I would think about the what ifs. I was probably one of the last people she talked to. What if I noticed the signs? um I there was a time I didn't really believe it was actually suicide. So, letting myself go back, I could not. I had to try to let it go some. So now, like you said today, it's honoring them, living life for them, basically how they would be living now.
Right.
And I always think about, her being here for my children and stuff like that. So now I try to think, she's in a beautiful place and she's not in pain and she's not struggling with the mental health issues that she was when she was alive. She's actually, as they say, at peace. And
Right.
that helps bring me comfort. And then also knowing that I'll see her one day.
Yeah.
I will find out all the truth
Right.
when that time comes and I'll be with her again.
Yeah. And I feel I wish that was something that we learned growing up was how to grieve, is,
Right.
how to deal with loss. Because I feel out of everything that we should be prepared for, 90% of what I have dealt with as an adult was not taught to me in school.
Right.
I couldn't tell you one lesson except for maybe my psychology class. I couldn't tell you one lesson out of that entire 12 years of being in school
Yeah.
taught me,
Yeah.
besides like all the negative shit. I could tell you. I could tell you I got bullied. I could tell you I attempted
Oh
at my
yeah.
life,
Hmm.
and it's really hard to talk about grief because not everybody really knows how to grieve in a healthy manner. And I think everybody struggles with that first step of grief, and that's
Right.
acceptance.
Yes.
Because I feel so many of us are so quick to jump to the denial stage. And, like you said, you had your doubts of the situation and you brought yourself back there, I'm sure, several times. And you touched on something earlier that I forgot to make a comment on, but whenever you mentioned journaling helps get
Hmm.
that stuff
Yes.
off your back, right?
Yes.
For me, I always equated journaling to getting demons off your back and onto a piece of paper. That
Yes.
way, it's so much easier to process things when you have it on a piece of paper and you're like, wow, I had those fucked up thoughts. I I felt this way today. And I've had projects given to me by my therapist, how to deal with some of the thoughts that I deal with. And it's so hard to help people sometimes when you can hardly help yourself.
Oh
But I
yeah.
feel but I feel it's so much easier to give advice than it is to help yourself with that
Right.
same advice.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, the writing, like you said, can be like getting bad things out, but it also can be used the other way around too. It can be used for the good, and I think I've seen you do that before with your friend Amy, and I do for Heather, is writing them a letter, basically, and writing them a note and expressing how you feel about them, and expressing what you would be doing today and things like that, and that kind of helps too. That kind of helps with the grief because I know people say, that she's always with you and things like that. You can talk out loud and she'll hear you, which I do that too. But sometimes it's nice to just write it down too.
Yeah, because I when I first started doing the balloons, she passed away in the pandemic. So I couldn't properly say goodbye to her. I didn't get to
Yeah.
physically see her because of that weird we can't see the dead when they pass away
Right.
in COVID. And when she passed away, I just remember being so devastated because we had all these plans to go see a sunset, go for a boat ride and everything else. And I think the day after she passed away, um, first thing I did was go watch a sunset.
Right.
And I think the very first no, you know what? It wasn't the day after. I stayed in my house, I think, for like a month before I went anywhere. And then the first time I went out to go watch a sunset, there was a phoenix over the pier in the sunset.
Hmm.
And I remember Judy pointing it out to me, and I'm like, wow. So they are really always there with us, man.
Oh,
But I hate when people try to use that as advice for people that grieve because it's like, yeah, I know she's always with us, but
I'm
it's
still
not,
struggling. Right.
I'm still struggling and it's not the
Hmm.
same because it's
Yeah.
like we didn't get a proper goodbye,
Right. Yep. Yep. Me
and
neither.
I remember when Santi passed away and his was an open casket and I didn't want to believe it was real. I was waiting for him to
Hmm.
wake up and say, I was just fucking with you guys, just it's grief is tricky, man.
It
And I
is.
wish there was somebody who would take the initiative to introduce it into schools and
Hmm.
properly talk about, hey, you're gonna possibly lose family
Right.
members or good friends, and
Yeah.
this is the reality of the world that we're in.
Yeah. This is the life cycle.
Yeah. And because I remember my grandfather, he passed away, I believe, when I was 7, and I didn't understand. I
Hmm.
remember going to his funeral again, didn't really understand.
Right.
And I wish my parents did a better job at telling me, hey, he passed away because he was sick, or hey, if you need something, I'm here for you. It was never, my family was never like that. And then when it finally got to a point where they were trying to encourage me to talk, my mom more specifically than my dad, because I live with my mom, but she would use that pain against me. And that, developed into the relationship that it is now. But I just wish more than anything that somebody could just step into a school and be like, hey, grief is something you're going to have to deal with. And here's how you get through it. Here are the resources to get through grief. And therapies out there and all these resources are at your hands and feet. We weren't given that opportunity when we were kids.
Right.
We were just, tough it out, put dirt in it, and has anybody passed away in your life recently that your kids were close to? Like nobody's passed away, have they?
No, not since that time,
Right.
thankfully. It is going to happen.
Sure.
You know, I don't know when, but
Yeah.
I'm not 100% prepared for that yet, but I will definitely work on preparing for that.
Yeah, because I feel it's always interesting to see how parents that have younger kids adapt to telling their kids. I don't want to say the full like telling them the full truth because I know that's a really heavy burden to give such a young kid. But I feel like if there's an ounce of honesty of hey, they went to heaven or something like that, it could help a younger kid, get through what they're going through when that said person passes away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so one thing I wanted to ask you, because we mentioned stigmas a little bit. What are some stigmas aside from your mom? Because I know you said you dealt with that when you were a younger teenager. What other stigmas have you faced on this journey of your mental health struggles?
Um, Basically at work, like when you get signing papers and things like that, they ask you about your medications and they ask you about your like medical history and stuff like that. And I have always been told you really don't want to be super honest on that because it's really none of their business.
Right.
Um, if something were to happen, you have an in case of emergency that they're supposed to contact. And yeah, so I am very cautious about that because I don't want to lose my job because they think I can't do it or yeah. So there's definitely a big stigma still there about that.
And you're a teacher, right?
I'm a teacher assistant.
Okay. Is there a specific age group or grade level that you're assisting with?
Yes, I'm actually my kids do a program called I Ready Math and I have pre-K 3. I have two pre-K 3 classrooms, 3-year-olds. And then I have pre-K 4, kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. So I'm all elementary school and I work with all those grades and help them with their math basically.
How is that dynamic dealing with like that such a huge age difference?
It's not bad at all, really. They're
Mhm.
great kids, they're very smart. It's I enjoy it. I enjoy working with this age group. I couldn't do high school. Too many hormones going on there. Middle school, the hormones are just getting started. They're taller than me now. Elementary, I'm good. They're small, they're cute, they're smart, they're sweet
Right.
most of the time.
Yeah. Do you ever have to talk with the parents directly about anything, or is it more so
Um,
you're the teacher?
As an assistant, I'm not actually allowed to, which I'm very happy about. I
Yeah.
have had an issue before arise where I did have to, but other than that, now usually our kids are very well behaved.
Right. How long have you been teacher's assistant for?
Um, so I would say about 7 years because I was pregnant with my youngest when I first started. So about 7 years now. And before this position, I actually worked at a special school where all the students were, somehow handicapped or developmentally delayed. We had, many that were in wheelchairs, some that were nonverbal. They used devices to communicate, which was like an iPad that had the words they want to say and they just press it and it talks for them basically. So that was a really rewarding experience as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you about that because I actually know a handful of people that work with special needs students. How was that experience for you? I know you said it was rewarding, but it's also got to be trying too because
Yes.
of, you could deal with high anger issues that they can't control, or, like you said, the nonverbal. So like, how was that experience overall for you?
It can be, it's very rewarding, but at times it can be very stressful. You can have one day where, I mean, honestly, one of the days I had to basically bathe a, 18-year-old that couldn't do anything for himself, and then the next day I'm trying to help one of the children with like one of their projects and they get really mad and they get physical. I've had people hit me and push me and things like that. And it's hard not to take it home. Basically, that's one of the big things about working with that population because you worry about them all the time. They really do say it takes a special person to work with that population, and it's true. You have to have patience, like really, really, really patient, not just a little patient. You got to be really patient. And you have to have that passion for helping them. You have to have a love for them, really, to take care of them like your own. So it is stressful, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. When did you make the decision to ultimately switch to where you're at now?
I just got to a point where I was having a hard time not taking it home, and I was very tired, like and physically too. I felt like it was time for a change. I wanted some kind of change. I didn't know what kind of change that was until it came available, basically.
Right,
And I'm so glad I did take that step because this position has been a bit less stressful,
right,
um, and easier on my body and things like that.
right. Yeah, no, I could definitely see how that would be physically trying as well as mentally trying. So glad you decided to put yourself first and kind of switch positions to mentally help yourself, move forward. Um,
Right.
we kind of grazed over family a little bit, and I really want to talk about this because I've known you for as long as I've known you, and I've seen you go through the ups and the downs, and love seeing how much support that you get in your family, especially your husband. So I want to talk about him. How is your, communication between you and him? You guys have a kid together, and you guys are married now. How is that dynamic, with communication and your mental health struggles and possibly his as well? Like how's that dynamic?
It um it's amazing. It is because he can even tell when something's wrong with me before I even tell him.
Right.
He can read it on my face or how I'm acting, and he'll dig until it comes out, basically, too. But like I feel comfortable telling him anything and everything. And he works night shifts. So I don't see him a whole lot during the week, but we always Facebook Messenger. And even just the other day, I was just so overwhelmed and so frustrated with so many things going on. And he was at work, but he called and we talked for an hour and a half. And like, it's not just me spilling, it's him saying, this is what I've dealt with. And he is an Air Force vet, and he works security now. And he's like, this was my experience with this, and gives me he brings me back down a lot, just like my mom does too. He brings me down, brings me back to reality. And he always reminds me, at the end of the day, um, I am okay. My family is okay. My boys are happy and healthy, and they're sleeping in their beds peacefully, and everything is okay. And he also reminds me, we can't control everything. Some things we have to kind of just let whatever's going to happen happen. And when I get tired, for example, last night even, I started falling asleep when we were watching Dateline, and it was like 6:30, and I'm usually up way later than that. But he was like, you should probably go ahead and go to bed and get some rest. And I needed that so bad. And I really did sleep really good last night. But he's good at recognizing when I need that rest, and he'll even, volunteer to help, make sure the boys are taken care of so I can get rest. And then also during the week, he helps me with tasks around the house. And that is like a huge, huge help because, I'll work all day and then I'll get home, and then I have to get the boys dinner and baths and homework and then a little playtime. And I don't feel like doing a lot of housework. So he takes care of that a lot during the week. And that really helps me too. So our marriage and dynamic is amazing. I'm so so thankful because before that, I was actually with the oldest son's father, and that was so toxic, so toxic. Even when he was 2 years old, he yelled at me in front of the 2 year old, and even since then, that's been an up and down thing, and it showed me what is not love, what is not wanted in a relationship. And my current husband Matt has just been absolutely amazing with the boys and with me, and I am so thankful for it every day because I
Yeah.
I would not be where I am.
Yeah, you absolutely deserve that support, and I'm really happy that your house, your family is happy. So that definitely makes my heart happy hearing that.
Yeah, thank you. And I thank you for your support too, because And there's definitely been many a nights I'm like up in the middle of the night and I'm like struggling, and I'll reach out to the group basically, and you're always like the first one on it, and so supportive and so sweet. And I'm glad that we've been there for each other's journey through this all, and it does feel like a big family and everything. And I love everyone. They're the sweetest people.
Yeah, really happy to have you part of our family because I feel in a life where I don't really know what that family dynamic looks like because of how I grew up, being able to create our own family and have our own relationships with people that have common goals, that have um the want to lift everybody up. It's always great to see everybody contribute and see everybody's thoughts on different subjects because definitely have had our ups and downs in that group with people that have been part of it. So always grateful whenever you share, whenever you comment, because it's it's refreshing to see people that aren't always as active, but always have mental health and everybody's well-being on their mind.
Right.
Um, and with that being said, on the family perspective, I know it's kind of like a running joke with everybody's marriage because the in-laws. How is your relationship with his family?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. She actually just watched our youngest for us this weekend so that we could get some time together to go out to dinner. And during that time I was hospitalized, she was very supportive. What can I do to help? Um, she has always been there for my husband too. She raised him basically as a single mom. And so knowing that history too, I know that they're amazing people and they're very supportive.
I love that. So at the end of every podcast, as you know, I'd love to read a quote or anything that has to do with the subject that we happen to be covering. Before I read mine, do you have anything for our listeners before we close out today?
Yes. So just a couple like quick tips would be, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to make friends. Please, please always take your medications if you have medications, and do not stop them cold turkey. Um, Take care of yourself, because if you can't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of others. And we want to help others, and we can't help others unless we help ourselves.
Right.
And just there was a couple things that Heather always used to say to me, and one of those things was, all we can do is the best we can do. And that is so true. And remember that in your day to day. Like, you are doing your best, even if it doesn't feel like it sometimes, you are doing your best, and that's okay. And then the other thing, I'm trying to think what else she said. Just had a brain freeze. I'm sorry. Oh,
Okay.
and the other is basically what's meant to be will be. Sometimes we're waiting on that like promotion or something, getting a new house or something. Um, when it's supposed to happen, it'll happen, and kind of trust in that process. And then one of my favorite quotes that I always say is basically, be the change you wish to see in the world. And that's kind of where we are with this is, we want to keep those conversations going, and we want to help others, and we want to help promote the prevention of suicides and things like that. And educate, educate, educate.
I love every word, especially the be the change you want to see in the world, because it's so important in any cause that you're supporting, guys, that you be the leader that you know you can be. Not all of us are meant to lead a pack, but if you can lead yourself in the right direction and follow the right people and surround yourself with the best possible people, you can go so far in this life. And like Brittany said, if you can't love yourself, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And it's okay to ask for help, guys. It's okay to call that crisis line. It's okay to look for a therapist. It's okay to have this conversation and say, "Hey, I'm not doing okay." It is more than okay to talk about that, guys. So please, please, please reach out, call whoever you need to call, and please know that you're always supported and you're always loved.
Yes.
Um, so the quote that I have is a little bit different than usual, guys. This is just the Mental Health Awareness Month post that I put in the group, and I wanted to read to you guys. Um, so this month being Mental Health Awareness Month, One in four people suffer from a mental illness, but sometimes it could be invisible. Please check on your loved ones, even the strong ones who seem to have it all together. You never know what somebody is facing. And, guys, I preach this every podcast. I'll continue to preach it. Suicide does not always have signs. Suicide and mental health struggles are not always visible to the human eye. But if you're going to be there for somebody, please know that what that entails. Not all of us are built to be a support system. Not all of us are built to help people, but you can help somebody even if you're not, if you don't feel that you can handle that, you can push it to somebody that can help them. Don't let people struggle, especially people that are in your immediate circle, because every day these suicide numbers climb, man and woman. Depression, mental health struggles do not discriminate. So please, guys, reach out to each other, remind each other how much that we're loved. And as always, be gentle with yourselves. Until next time, guys, take care. Much love.